I've been talking about parables in this series of videos, and they all begin the same way. They begin with the introduction, the kingdom of heaven is like. Jesus spends a lot of time talking about the kingdom. So much so that a lot of people, myself included, would argue that it is at the core of what he was doing and what he was talking about through his whole ministry. But for a long time, the kingdom was pretty much a forgotten part, or even an ignored part, of what people studied when they talked about Jesus. This happened for a long time. Up until about 100 years ago, there was sort of a new wave, a new movement where people were realizing that this is something that we needed to be talking about more. And so there was a new movement, a new discovery, new excitement around what it meant to be the kingdom. But then all of a sudden, that changed. You see that the name kingdom comes with some baggage. First of all, even 100 years ago, most of the kings in the world were little more than figureheads for what that country used to be. Even now, in 2019, there really aren't a lot of kings with actual power who are also at the same time loved. There could be a few that we could argue about, but most of them are symbols. Then on top of that, theologians started to talk about what were some of the other options, thinking that there must be some more contemporary, relevant terminology that we could use, and I was one of them too, thinking that we needed something that fit our political reality. And so some alternatives were suggested. Somebody said, well, we could use dominion. That's one of the words even used in the Bible. Empire seems to fit in with not just political, but economic and other terminology that we use. Or regime or dynasty, and yet all of these carry with them either an outdated terminology, an outdated political system, or some negative aspects of the ways that human governments have impacted human society. So seemed to be that the main alternative, the leading forerunner of the options presented was reign, R-E-I-G-H-N, that we would stop talking about the kingdom of God and instead talk about the reign of God. Well, reign communicates power. Reign communicates some sort of timeline. Well, all of a sudden, something got in the way of it being absorbed as the de facto replacement. That thing is that people started liking kingdom terminology again. Now, maybe I stopped paying attention to the conversation. Maybe people are still concerned that kingdom of heaven carries with it some baggage, some political baggage, some human baggage. But it seems to me that we've stopped looking for replacements because it seems we've realized that people do still care about kingdom terminology. And I would argue there are a few things that led to that. One of them, say what you will about the Disney princess phenomenon, but it's allowed people, empowered people, to talk about kingdom words again. If there is a princess, there is a king. If there is a princess, there is a kingdom. And so when people talk about princesses, even if they're doing it derisively, they're talking about the same kind of concept that Jesus was talking about. Whether they like it or not, they understand what it means. Another thing that happened is Prince Charles handed over the torch in terms of a relevant monarchical figure, if that's a word, to his sons. And his sons were young and charming, seemingly handsome, and eligible. So these two princes found popular and beautiful and gracious and charming women to marry, and these weddings were central events in our culture. All of these things as well as other stories, comic books, movies that brought back this terminology, meant that people were talking about kingdom terminology again. So then what does it mean when Jesus is talking about the kingdom? What is the kingdom of heaven? Well, in the Gospel of Matthew, we read about the kingdom of heaven, and in other Gospels we read about the kingdom of God. The same concept is communicated. So what is the kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven is the realm where the king's values are upheld. And the king, of course, is God. The kingdom of heaven is where the king has authority. And if that king, i.e. God, has authority, then no other king, including earthly ones, have the ultimate say. What is the kingdom of God? In the kingdom of God, in the kingdom of heaven, the king's children inherit the riches and the power of the king. So when Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven, he's not just talking about a place where we will go, but he's talking about a place that we will bring by living out these values, by empowering ourselves and empowering the people in our world. Thanks for tuning in.